The sun was beginning to set when Emily Thompson caught the first glimpses of the silhouettes of the Appalachian Mountains. Her old Chevy Nova groaned with every turn of the winding road, as if sharing the weight she carried in her heart. 5 years had passed since she left Green Valley, full of dreams and ambitions, determined to conquer Chicago. Now at 28, she was returning with a suitcase full of disappointments and a degree that felt more like a burden than an achievement. The radio crackled, alternating between old songs and static, providing a melancholic soundtrack for her journey back. The ancient trees lining the road seemed the same as those from her childhood, their dense canopies forming a green tunnel guiding her home. The scent of the forest, even through the closed car windows, filled her nostrils, awakening long-dormant memories. "How you can always come home," Grandma Eleanor's words echoed in her mind. Had her grandmother, with that wisdom only years can bring, foreseen this moment? While Chicago swallowed her in its vortex of concrete and loneliness, Grandma Eleanor's weekly letters were her only connection to Green Valley. Each handwritten word carried the aroma of herbs from the backyard and the promise of a warm embrace. The sky was beginning to darken when Emily noticed the lights of a car in her rearview mirror. On a road that was usually deserted at that hour, the presence of the vehicle caused an instinctive discomfort. The car maintained a constant distance, its high beams reflecting uncomfortably in her mirrors. She tried to accelerate, but the Chevy Nova responded with a worrisome noise. "Don't fail me now, please," she murmured to the dashboard as if the car could hear her. That's when the engine sputtered for the first time, once, twice, 3 times, until it died completely, forcing her to pull over onto the shoulder. The car that had been following her also stopped, a few meters behind. Emily's heart raced as she saw 3 men step out of the vehicle. Their silhouettes slowly approached, outlined against the light of the headlights. The tallest of them, wearing a cowboy hat that seemed out of place in that setting, knocked on her window. "Car trouble, miss?" he asked with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Before she could respond, a deep sound emerged from the forest. It was like a distant roar, but unlike anything Emily had ever heard before. The men exchanged glances, visibly unsettled. The sound grew louder, and with it came movement in the shadows between the trees. Seizing the distraction, Emily unlocked the door on the opposite side and ran into the forest. Her feet seemed to know exactly where to step, even in the growing darkness. Branches moved strangely, as if clearing a path for her while blocking her pursuers. That's when she saw it. An enormous bear, larger than any animal she had ever studied in her years of biology. Its eyes glowed with an almost human intelligence, and its presence was both terrifying and comforting. The animal positioned itself between her and the men who quickly retreated to their car. Trembling, Emily watched the vehicle speed away. The bear turned its gaze toward her for a moment, and an inexplicable sense of familiarity washed over her. Before she could process what was happening, the animal vanished into the darkness of the woods, leaving her alone with her questions. When she finally reached her grandmother's house, walking the last few miles, Grandma Eleanor was waiting on the porch, as if she knew exactly when Emily would arrive. Her grandmother's embrace was just as she remembered, smelling of rosemary and longing. "You took your time coming back, my dear," Grandma Eleanor said, her dark eyes gleaming with ancestral wisdom. "But you arrived at the right moment." That night, as they sipped tea in the old kitchen, Emily tried to recount the incident on the road, but the words felt inadequate to describe what had happened. Her grandmother simply smiled, as if holding on to a precious secret. "The forest protects its own," was all Grandma Eleanor said before getting up to fetch more tea. Lying in her old bed, Emily watched the shadows of the trees dancing on her ceiling. The failure in Chicago, which once seemed like an unbearable weight, was beginning to feel like part of a greater plan. Something had brought her back to Green Valley, something stronger than her will or her choices. Before falling asleep, she thought she heard that distant roar again, like a wild lullaby echoing through the night. And for the first time in a long while, Emily slept peacefully, lulled by the sounds of the forest that somehow seemed to be awakening within her. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us which city you're watching from, and stay tuned. The first rays of sunlight found Emily already awake, gazing out the window at her grandmother's backyard. The medicinal herb garden, which had always been Grandma Eleanor's pride, seemed even more expansive than in her memories. Plants of all kinds grew in an order only her grandmother understood, forming circles and patterns that, when seen from above, resembled ancient symbols. Grandma Eleanor was already up, as always, moving among the plants with the grace of a long-rehearsed dance. Her gnarled hands caressed the leaves with reverence, and her lips moved in whispers Emily couldn't quite make out. "Come here, my child," called Grandma Eleanor without turning around. "The herbs are different today. They sense your presence." Emily walked down to the garden, noticing how the plants seemed to lean slightly toward her. A gentle breeze carried scents that awakened memories of her childhood. Afternoons spent picking herbs with her grandmother, learning their names and properties. "Grandma," Emily began hesitantly, "about last night. That bear." "Ah, you've already met our guardian." Grandma Eleanor smiled, her eyes gleaming with ancient knowledge. "He always appears when one of us returns." "One of us?" Instead of answering directly, Grandma Eleanor led her to a small structure at the back of the yard, which Emily had always known as the herb shed. As she opened the door, a strong aroma of dried herbs and incense enveloped her. The walls were covered in drawings and symbols that seemed to vibrate under the light streaming through the small window. "Our family has been guarding the secrets of this forest for generations," explained Grandma Eleanor, removing a loose floorboard. From inside, she pulled out an old book, bound in dark leather and marked with the same symbols Emily had seen on the trees in the forest. "This book belonged to your great-grandmother, who received it from her mother and so on through the generations. We are the guardians of Green Valley, protecting not just the trees and animals, but also the ancient magic that lives here." Emily carefully flipped through the book, its yellowed pages revealing detailed drawings of plants, rituals, and creatures that seemed straight out of fairy tales. Among them was the drawing of a massive bear, identical to the one she had encountered the night before. "But that's not possible," Emily protested, her scientific mind struggling against what her eyes were seeing. "There are no native bears in the United States, let alone in the Appalachian Mountains." "There are many things your science has yet to explain, my dear," Grandma Eleanor replied patiently. "The guardian is no ordinary animal. He is as ancient as this land, and his form is merely a reflection of the power that protects." At that moment, the sound of engines shattered the morning's peace. Through the window, they saw a line of trucks passing by on the main road, carrying mining equipment. Grandma Eleanor furrowed her brow. "They're getting bolder," she murmured. "The forest is restless, Emily. Those men who followed you yesterday, it wasn't a coincidence." Gradually, Grandma Eleanor revealed the true situation. A large mining company was interested in the lands around Green Valley. They had discovered valuable mineral deposits in the mountains and were now planning an operation that would destroy much of the forest. "But why not report this to the authorities?" Emily questioned. "We've tried," her grandmother replied with a weary sigh. "But they have money and influence. The documents always disappear, the complaints get filed away. Our only protection has always been the forest and its guardians." Throughout the day, Grandma Eleanor began teaching Emily the first steps of her legacy. She showed her how to identify the signs of the forest, how to interpret the movement of the leaves and the songs of the birds. Every plant in her garden had a purpose, every symbol a story. At night, sitting on the porch, Grandma Eleanor told stories of other guardians who came before them. Strong women who, in different times, faced those who threatened the balance of the forest. "But what if I'm not capable?" asked Emily, her voice trembling slightly. "What if I don't have that connection?" "You already do," Grandma Eleanor smiled. "Why do you think Chicago never felt like your true home? Why do you think you always felt more alive among the trees than among buildings? The blood of the guardians runs through your veins, Emily. You just needed to come back to awaken. Say that gift." A familiar sound echoed from the forest, the same deep roar from the night before. This time, however, Emily felt no fear. Something within her answered that call like a string being plucked into resonance. "Tomorrow," said Grandma Eleanor, standing up, "we'll begin your real training. The forest has been waiting for you for a long time, my dear." And now, more than ever, we need your strength." That night, Emily dreamed of ancient women dancing among the trees, their hair intertwined with leaves and flowers. In the dream, she joined them, and the forest sang around her. When she woke up, the first light of morning painted the sky, and she knew her life would never be the same. Dawn found Emily following Grandma Eleanor along an ancient trail, almost invisible to untrained eyes. The dew still covered the leaves, and the morning mist danced among the trees, creating ethereal shapes that seemed to watch them. Her grandmother walked with surprising confidence for her age, as if every stone and root along the path were an old friend. "Here," said Grandma Eleanor, stopping in a small circular clearing. "This is the place where all the guardians began, their awakening." The space was perfectly round, surrounded by ancient trees whose trunks were marked with the same symbols from the old book. In the center, a flat stone emerged from the ground, its surface covered in moss and ancient carvings. "Take a seat," instructed Grandma Eleanor, pointing to the rock. "Close your eyes and breathe as I taught you." Emily obeyed, feeling the coolness of the rock beneath her crossed legs. The morning air was filled with scents: damp earth, wildflowers, fungi, and decomposing leaves. Her training in biology allowed her to identify each element, but now there was something more, an additional dimension she had never noticed before. "Don't try to analyze," her grandmother's voice sounded distant. "Just feel. The forest isn't a collection of separate elements to be studied. It's a living web, and you are part of it." Gradually, Emily began to understand. The sound of the wind in the leaves wasn't just noise, it was a language. The movement of the roots beneath her feet wasn't random, it was a rhythmic pulsing, like a heartbeat. The forest was alive, not just in the biological sense she knew, but in a deeper, more conscious way. A warmth began to rise up her spine, spreading through her body like roots of light. When she opened her eyes, gasping, she saw that small flowers had sprouted around the rock where she sat, their petals opening like white stars. "Grandma!" she exclaimed, both amazed and frightened. Did I do this?" Grandma Eleanor smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "You and the forest together. The gift is awakening." In the days that followed, Emily threw herself into her training with the same dedication she had once applied to her scientific studies. She learned to identify the patterns of energy flowing through the trees, to communicate with birds through specific whistles, and to prepare herbal mixtures that strengthened the connection with the forest. Each morning brought a new discovery. Under the guidance of her grandmother, Emily learned that the ancient guardians had created a protective network around Green Valley, using the symbols carved into the trees as anchor points for their magic. "But it's not magic like in fairy tales," explained Grandma Eleanor as she taught Emily how to renew the markings. "It's the power of nature itself, concentrated and channeled through our connection with it." One afternoon, while practicing her focus in the clearing, Emily felt a familiar presence. The great bear emerged silently from the forest, its golden eyes fixed on her. This time, she felt no fear. "He has many names," said Grandma Eleanor, who watched from a distance. "Each generation of guardians has known him in a different way, but his essence is always the same. He is the very force of the forest made manifest." The bear approached Emily, and she instinctively reached out her hand. The touch of its rough fur sent a wave of energy through her body, and for a moment, she saw the forest through its eyes, a complex web of light and life, every being connected to the others in an endless pattern of relationships. The vision left her dizzy, but it also brought a deep certainty. Her return to Green Valley had not been a defeat, it was a call she had finally answered. However, not everything was a positive discovery. At night, lying in her bed, Emily could feel the restlessness of the forest. The dreams of the trees were disturbed by visions of machines and destruction. The threat from the mining company was growing, and with her newfound gift, she could feel the forest's fear as if it were her own. "We need to prepare," said Grandma Eleanor one morning, her face more serious than usual. "They will come soon, and this time it will be different. The forest chose this moment to awaken your gift for a reason, Emily. A battle is approaching." That night, alone in the clearing, Emily practiced the movements her grandmother had taught her. an ancient ritual dance that strengthened her connection to the forest. As her feet traced sacred patterns on the ground, she felt her power grow. Flowers bloomed where she stepped, and the air around her seemed to shimmer with its own light. The guardian bear watched from a distance, its presence a silent confirmation that she was on the right path. Emily knew she still had much to learn, but she also knew time was running out. The true test of her abilities was approaching, and she would need every ounce of strength she could muster. "I'm ready," she whispered to the forest, and the trees whispered back, their leaves dancing in a breeze that carried ancient promises of protection and power. If this story intrigued you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Let us know which city you're watching from, and stay tuned. The sound of heavy engines shattered the morning peace in Green Valley. Emily, who was practicing her rituals in Grandma Eleanor's garden, felt the vibration before she even heard the noise. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and the plants around her rustled in protest. "They're here," announced Grandma Eleanor, appearing on the porch. Her face was serious, but her eyes shone with fierce determination. "Today is the day you show your true strength, my child." A caravan of trucks and heavy machinery rolled down the main road. At the front, in a black pickup truck, Emily recognized the man in the cowboy hat who had pursued her days before. Beside him, a gray-suited executive held a briefcase of documents. "Those are court orders," explained Grandma Eleanor, watching the commotion. "They've finally gotten the authorization to start the exploitation, but they don't know the forest has its own laws." Emily closed her eyes, focusing as she had been taught. She could feel every tree, every root, every living being in the forest responding to her awareness. The initial fear had been replaced by a deep certainty. This was her moment, her purpose. "I'm going to them," she said, her voice steady. "You're not going alone," replied Grandma Eleanor, handing her a necklace of crystals and herbs. "Where?" "This. It's an amulet that has been passed down through all the guardians before you. It will amplify your connection to the forest." As she put on the necklace, Emily felt a wave of energy surge through her body. It was as if all the previous guardians were with her, their voices echoing through the centuries in a silent chorus of strength and wisdom. She walked to where the vehicles had stopped, at the entrance of the area they intended to claim. The man in the hat smiled as he recognized her, but his smile faltered when he saw the transformation in her posture. She was no longer the frightened biologist on the road. She was a guardian in her territory. "Miss," the executive began, holding out some papers, "we have all the necessary permits here for—" "No," Emily interrupted, her voice carrying an authority she didn't know she possessed. "You have papers. I have something much older." The wind began to pick up, making the leaves dance in hypnotic patterns. The sky, once clear, darkened with clouds that seemed to appear out of nowhere. The men exchanged uneasy glances. "Listen, lady," said the man in the hat, stepping forward threateningly. "We don't want any trouble, but—" A familiar roar cut through the air, making him step back. The guardian bear emerged from the forest, larger and more imposing than ever. But he wasn't alone. Other animals began to appear: jaguars, maned wolves, birds of prey. The forest was showing its strength. Emily raised her hands, and the trees responded. Roots began to emerge from the ground, winding their way between the machines. Flowers bloomed instantly, their vibrant colors contrasting with the cold metal of the equipment. "This land is protected," she declared, her voice amplified by the power of the amulet. "Not by your papers, but by forces that have existed since the first tree grew here." The executive tried to argue, waving his documents, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of the forest awakening. The wind picked up, carrying seeds and pollen that glowed like stars around them. The symbols on the trees began to emit a soft light, forming a visible network of energy. "Impossible," someone murmured among the workers. One of the machine operators tried to start his equipment, but the roots had already tangled themselves in the gears. Flowers sprouted from the exhaust pipes and vines wrapped around the wheels. Nature was reclaiming its space. The guardian bear stepped forward, its golden eyes fixed on the intruders. No physical threat was needed. Its presence, along with the demonstration of the forest's power, was message enough. "You have a choice," said Emily, her voice echoing with the power of all the guardians who had come before her. "You can leave now, respecting this place, or you can face forces that your papers cannot control." The executive looked at his useless machines, at the animals surrounding them, at the darkened sky, and at the woman who seemed to glow with her own light. Slowly, he put away his documents. "Let's go," he ordered, his voice trembling slightly. "This place, it's not worth the risk." One by one, the men retreated to their vehicles. Some needed help to free their machines from the roots and vines. When the last truck disappeared around the bend in the road, Emily felt her legs weaken. Grandma Eleanor was by her side instantly, supporting her. "You did it, my child. You are truly a guardian now." The sky gradually brightened, and the animals returned to the forest. The guardian bear lingered for a moment, its eyes meeting Emily's, in a look of mutual recognition, before disappearing among the trees. "What happens now?" asked Emily, still feeling the power flowing through her. "Now," smiled Grandma Eleanor, "we begin the true journey. Protecting the forest is not a single moment, but a lifelong commitment. And you, my dear, have just proven that you are more than ready for it." The trees whispered in approval, their leaves dancing in a silent celebration. Emily knew her grandmother was right. This was not an ending, but a beginning. A new chapter in a story as old as the forest itself. A year had passed since the confrontation that forever changed life in Green Valley. The news of what happened, though distorted and downplayed by the local media, spread through the region like wildfire. Some called it an inexplicable phenomenon, others a supernatural manifestation. For Emily, it was simply the start of her true journey. The former biologist who had returned defeated from Chicago had been transformed. Her scientific knowledge, which once seemed to conflict with her new role, now blended seamlessly with the ancestral wisdom of the Guardians. She had found a way to unite the two worlds, using her academic background to document and better understand the secrets of the forest. On a fall morning, while cataloging new species of medicinal plants with properties previously unknown to modern science, Emily received an unexpected visit. A young researcher from the university, Olivia Martinez, had heard rumors about the extraordinary botanical discoveries in Green Valley. "Your reports are fascinating," said Olivia, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "The way you describe the interaction between species, it's as if the forest were a single conscious organism." Emily exchanged a knowing glance with Grandma Eleanor, who was preparing tea in the kitchen. "Perhaps it is exactly that," she replied with an enigmatic smile. In the following months, more researchers began to arrive. Green Valley, once a forgotten spot on the map, transformed into a hub for environmental studies. Emily, with her grandmother's blessing, began to share part of her knowledge, only what the forest allowed, of course. "You are raising a new generation of protectors," observed Grandma Eleanor one evening, as they gazed at the stars from the porch. "Not all of them will be guardians like us, but every person who learns to respect and understand the forest makes our mission stronger." The research center that Emily Thompson established in the family's old abandoned house had become a model for environmental conservation. Students and scientists came from all over the country to learn about sustainable forest management techniques and the responsible use of medicinal plants. But only Emily and Grandma Eleanor knew the true secrets. On full moon nights, when the visitors had already left, they still performed the ancient rituals. The guardian bear would appear occasionally, its presence a constant reminder of the magic that pulsed beneath the surface of everyday reality. On one such night, while performing her ritual dance in the sacred clearing, Emily had a vision. She saw other young women like herself, scattered across the country, each protecting their own piece of nature. She realized that Green Valley was just one of many sacred places that needed guardians. "It's time," said Grandma Eleanor when Emily shared her vision. "You should start searching for and training the next generation." And so Emily began her new mission. Among the young researchers visiting Green Valley, she could identify those who had the dormant gift. With subtlety and wisdom, she planted the seeds of ancient knowledge in fertile soil. Olivia was the first to show signs of awakening. One afternoon, while collecting samples, the flowers began to bloom around her, responding to her presence. Her eyes widened in recognition, and Emily knew she had found the first of many. Time passed, and Green Valley flourished. The forest, stronger and more protected than ever, expanded naturally. The old degraded areas recovered, and new species were discovered. Scientific knowledge and the ancient wisdom of the Guardians created a perfect balance. Grandma Eleanor, now with completely white hair, watched with pride as her granddaughter guided a new generation of Guardians. The ancient book gained new chapters, written by Emily's hand, blending modern knowledge with ancestral traditions. On an especially significant afternoon, Emily was in her favorite clearing, surrounded by a small group of apprentices. The guardian bear appeared, more majestic than ever, and for the first time allowed others besides her to see its true form. "The forest chooses its protectors," Emily said, repeating the words her grandmother had told her so long ago. "And, now more than ever, it needs us." The young guardians in training nodded, their eyes shining with the same recognition Emily had felt during her own awakening. The forest whispered around them, its ancient and new voices blending into a promise of continuity. That night, alone in her clearing, Emily reflected on her journey. The failure that had brought her back to Green Valley had, in fact, been the first step toward her true destiny. The biologist who had dreamed of making a difference in the world had found her path, not in the labs of Chicago, but in the ancestral secrets of her homeland. The moon shone over the Appalachian Mountains, and the stars seemed closer than ever. Emily smiled, feeling the power of the forest flow through her. Her destiny was complete, but her story, like that of the forest, would continue through the generations to come. And deep within the woods, the guardian bear let out a soft roar, a sound that echoed with ancient promises and renewed hopes. If this story intrigued you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit like. Tell us which city you're watching from and stay tuned.